How's it going, guys? It's Cass. So I'm sure many of you out there were thinking maybe I can start concoction skills for the next patch. So with patch notes just coming out, I thought I'd take the time to talk about changes to concoctions and if I think it's a good idea. Spoilers, I think it's a terrible idea to start concoctions. So the question is why? This line right here, concoction skills now require an unarmed weapon set. They no longer deal your base unarmed damage, instead, dealing only attack damage specified from the skill, like marks. Not sure what that means. Most of the marks aren't really applying damage, so I don't know what the comparison is there. But that aside, we also have they now consume 5 mana charges per use, previously 3. So, first things first, this line here, this means Widow Hail, gone. Quivers, gone. You could only, I believe, use a shield with concoction skills now. AKA, we lose almost all of this potential scaling for this skill. This is an insane nerf to the point where I don't think, even if this was the only nerf to concoction skills, I think concoction skills would be completely dead. This line here, they no longer deal your base unarmed damage. I don't believe that we had a ton of unarmed damage baseline to begin with, so I don't think this is that big of a nerf. But I'm not 100% sure what our base unarmed damage was to begin with. But like I said, it's probably not that big of an issue. This next version here is just an extension of the unarmed damage stuff. And then let's talk about the mana flash charges. Now, this is how much concoction skills cost originally. And at that time, I was still playing concoction skills perfectly fine, but I had a ton of more investment into charges gained. On top of having the mana flask, on top of having connected chemistry, I also invested in the tree to have mana flask gain. Now, if we're doing less damage, and also they nerfed a lot of the endgame health of mobs, so we don't really know the difference between like the current damage numbers and what the actual damage requirements will be. But most likely these will be significantly worse, even in the grand scheme of things. So having less damage and a higher cost means that you will feel the cost much, much more. Now, another thing to point out with the cost is this node here. We had some changes with Pathfinder. Now connected chemistry is completely gone. What is connected chemistry? Connected chemistry is what gave us 50% more flash charges gained. So not only is the skill now significantly more expensive, we're also losing a node that basically helped to solve the cost of the skill to begin with. So that is now just completely gone. The replacements for connected chemistry is basically useless in the when it comes to like anything that we gain from the tree itself. It is kind of cool that we now have elemental damage reduction here, but realistically, like elemental hits aren't necessarily the most annoying things. Um, Maybe there's a world where you do where you stack evasion as Pathfinder now, and you don't take acrobatics, then you get elemental damage reduction on top of having your hits be less impactful because of evasion rating. I'm not 100% sure, but the problem is it also requires this practical remedies thing, which basically just gives you immunity to one ailment, which is pretty crazy to have an ascendancy that is have just one ailment immunity. Like, it's so bad. And I don't know if that means that ailments in general are going to feel a lot worse, but yeah, this is weird. In order to get to an actual good node, you have to go through another node that's basically useless. On top of that, they did not remove contagious contamination. This still exists for some reason. Um, this is literally just a worse version of Herald Plague. Oh, and speaking of Herald Plague, let's talk about Herald Plague. So if you're playing Poisonous Concoction, you're probably thinking, well, at least we still have some good clear, right? Well, yeah, that's also gone. Herald of Plague now requires you to have a martial weapon. And now, since we have to be unarmed to play Poisonous Concoction, we can't have a martial weapon and do damage, so Herald of Plague now completely useless with Poisonous Concoction. So yeah, if you can't tell, I'm kind of in shock with how ridiculous of a nerf this is. This is like honestly one of the heaviest handed nerfs I've seen to a skill ever in Path of Exile. Like, you take away all of this damage scaling, and the only thing that you do is increase some of the magnitudes of ailments of some of the concoctions. So let's talk about that. If they're going to nerf the core mechanics of Poison Concoction and other concoction skills, then surely that means they have good buffs coming. Bleeding Concoction now has 200% more magnitude of bleeding inflicted. I believe this means that the 20% baseline, I'm not sure if bleed has different, but I believe all ailments are 20% of the initial hits. So instead of 20%, it's now 60% of the initial hits. And this also scales more with increased magnitude. So overall, this is pretty good, going from 40 to 60. But with the amount of damage we're losing, there is no world where this even gets close to what it was before. And even if it was OP before, which honestly, after the nerf to bow damage, I don't think concoction skills were that broken. They were still pretty good, but I don't think that they were like super busted. I don't see a world where this changes anything. On top of that, no one really played Bleeding Concoction. Explosive Concoction got the same treatment, more magnitude of ignites inflicted. This is okay. The problem with Explosive Concoction, though, is that the base crit of Explosive Concoction is not good. So you can't really play crit ignite, so it's probably just dead in the water. Then we have the Poisonous Concoction changes, or Fulminating Concoction just has more shock chance, which if you played Fulminating Concoction, you were always basically at max shock. So I don't know what this really does, if anything. And honestly, if this means like, oh, you get max shock chance more often, that means we're doing almost no damage with that skill, and it's completely useless. Poisonous Concoction is probably the weirdest change of all of them. We got 200% more magnitude of poison inflicted. Same general idea with magnitude. But now it deals base physical damage instead of chaos damage, which is interesting. There really isn't like increased fizz on the tree over here, as far as I know. So it's like, okay, well, there's not increased physical damage over here on the tree. We kind of would have to path over here, so that's probably not good. So now we're probably just not able to take any of these chaos damage nodes anymore, because it doesn't do chaos damage. Take none of these nodes. So basically, Poisonous Concoction is like pseudo completely gutted when it comes to scaling other forms of damage. Like, sure, you could probably take this node, take more proj damage nodes, take like this node, but still, it's bizarre that this is even really a thing that was done to the skill. It doesn't really make that much sense. The only thing that might be okay is a build that's like scaling just like ailments in general, and you play like bleed poison concoction, and you're applying basically but in order to apply bleeds, you would have to scale the ability to actually apply bleeds. So I don't know. It's such a weird change. It does not seem like a good change. It doesn't really make sense with how the tree is laid out. Those chaos nodes on the tree, by the way, were like almost only good like for attack based poison builds. Were literally only good for Poisonous Concoction. You probably don't even take these nodes on any of the other chaos builds just because of how good fizz based poison builds are. So yeah, it's weird. It's not this change feels very short-sighted. Then we have the Shattering Concoction change. Basically, they said, okay, Shattering Concoction, you're losing almost all of your damage, but hey, you have more freeze buildup. Oh, also, freeze buildup is 48% less or something like that. So yeah, it's actually absurd. But yeah, Concoction skills are pretty much dead. There is one buff. You know, we have 1.4 attack per second instead of 1.2, so that's a pretty big damage increase. I'm sure they'll probably see this as an oversight that they didn't also nerf concoctions in here. So expect 25% less attack speed on your concoctions, probably too. But yeah, that's that's basically it. These skills are probably dead. Um, I might decide to do something stupid and try to play it later on, but I think I'm probably just gonna play Huntress and actually try to have fun with the new class, and forget these skills existed until they decide to rebuff them. It sucks. I It's crazy that we went from like concoctions being terrible at the beginning of the league to concoctions being insane to concoctions getting like kind of nerfed to now concoctions being completely terrible again. It's just an absolute roller coaster in 4 months for a concoction player. But yeah, it is what it is. Hopefully this video wasn't too rambly. I plan on playing a lot of the new patch. I don't know what kind of videos I'm going to make. Obviously, I can't really make concoction videos because they're dead. But if I find something fun or interesting with Huntress, I'll probably make a build guide for that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you were thinking about league starting concoctions, please don't. Thanks for watching.